The rain, a relentless curtain against the ancient windows, whispered secrets against the Harrington estate. It was 1847, and in a chamber bathed in soft, melancholic light, Lady Caroline prepared for a destiny not of her choosing. Her fingers, delicate as porcelain, traced the ivory silk of her wedding gown, a symbol of a life about to be irrevocably altered. At 23, a season past the bloom of expectation in London society, Caroline had quietly accepted the solace of spinsterhood. Then, a gentle intrusion, the reflection of her mother, Lady Eleanor Harrington, appeared in the mirror, bearing a small wooden box adorned with mother-of-pearl. "My dear," she murmured, her voice a soothing balm against the storm outside. "You are radiant." Tears shimmered in her eyes as she opened the box, revealing the Harrington family's heirloom pearl hairpins, each one a tiny beacon of history and hope. "Thank you, Mother," Caroline whispered, her voice barely audible above the rhythmic drumming of the rain. "Though I fear beauty has never been counted among my virtues." "Nonsense," Lady Eleanor gently scolded, her fingers deftly securing the pearls into Caroline's chestnut waves. "True beauty blossoms from within, my darling. You possess a gentle spirit and a keen mind, qualities that endure far beyond mere physical charms." Caroline gazed at her reflection, studying the soft hazel of her eyes, the delicate features that had never stirred a heart, the modest figure draped in finery her family could barely afford. Unremarkable, that was the word, in a society that prized dazzling beauty above all else. "Do you truly believe this union will bring happiness, Mother?" Lady Eleanor's hands paused, a fleeting shadow crossing her face. She had always dreamed of a love match for her only daughter, a union like her own. But with the family's dwindling fortune and Caroline's advancing years, the Duke of Ashworth's proposal had seemed nothing short of a miracle. "The Duke is a respectable man of considerable standing," she replied carefully. "Such an advantageous match is more than many could ever hope for." "You haven't answered my question," Caroline observed, turning to face her mother directly. Eleanor sighed, taking her daughter's hands in her own. "Happiness takes many forms, my darling. Security, respect, position. These are not insignificant foundations upon which contentment may be built. And who knows what may grow from such beginnings?" What remained unspoken was the desperate relief that had washed over the Harrington household when Henry Ashworth, the 30-year-old Duke, had deigned to offer his hand. His estates were vast, his lineage impeccable, his reputation formidable. That he had chosen their daughter was a blessing they dared not examine too closely. A knock interrupted their quiet discourse. Sir James Harrington, Caroline's father, entered, his once imposing frame now slightly stooped with age and the weight of financial anxieties. "The carriage is prepared," he announced, his voice laced with forced cheerfulness. His eyes softened as he beheld his daughter in her bridal attire. "My dear girl, you are a vision." Caroline crossed the room to embrace him, inhaling the familiar scent of tobacco and cologne. "Thank you, Father." "The Duke is a fortunate man," Sir James continued, his voice thick with emotion, "though I doubt he realizes just how fortunate." "We mustn't keep him waiting," Lady Eleanor reminded them, carefully adjusting Caroline's veil. It would not do to be late to one's own wedding. The journey to the family chapel unfolded in silence, the rhythmic drumming of rain on the carriage roof a mournful counterpoint to the anxious beating of Caroline's heart. Through the window, the familiar countryside blurred into watercolor impressions of green and gray. By sunset, she would be mistress of an estate she had never seen, wife to a man she barely knew. Hours later, standing in the hushed grandeur of the family chapel, Caroline felt a strange detachment as she repeated her vows. The Duke towered beside her, his sharp profile etched against the stained glass like a figure carved from stone. His voice, deep and authoritative, betrayed no emotion as he pledged himself to her. "I, Henry George William Ashworth, take thee, Caroline Elizabeth Harrington, to be my lawfully wedded wife." When their hands touched during the exchange of rings, she noticed how cold his fingers were against hers. The assembled guests, mostly his acquaintances, his side of the church filled with England's most distinguished families, watched with polite interest, assessing her worth with calculating eyes. "You may kiss the bride," the vicar announced, his voice echoing against the ancient stone walls. The Duke leaned forward, pressing his lips briefly, formally, against hers, a perfunctory seal to their contract, nothing more. Caroline closed her eyes, trying to imagine that this cold touch held some promise of future warmth, but the moment ended before she could convince herself of the fantasy. The wedding breakfast that followed was an elegant but subdued affair. Caroline found herself seated beside her new husband at the head table, acutely aware of how little they had spoken beyond the necessary exchanges of the ceremony. "You have a lovely home, Lady Harrington," the Duke commented to her mother, his tone polite but distant. "The gardens, in particular, show remarkable care." "Caroline is responsible for those," Lady Eleanor replied with subtle pride. "She has quite a talent for horticulture." The Duke's gaze shifted to Caroline, seeming to truly look at her for the first time. "Indeed, an unusual interest for a young lady." "I find peace among growing things," Caroline answered, seizing the opportunity to establish some connection, however tenuous. "There is something miraculous in nurturing life from seed to bloom. A flicker of something, perhaps surprise, perhaps interest, crossed his features before his expression resumed its customary reserve. "Oakenhurst has extensive gardens, though I fear they've suffered from neglect in recent years. Perhaps you will find them a worthy challenge." "I should like that very much," Caroline replied, offering a tentative smile that went unreturned as the Duke turned to acknowledge a congratulatory toast from a neighboring landowner. As the afternoon progressed, Caroline observed her husband from beneath lowered lashes. Henry Ashworth was undeniably handsome, tall and broad-shouldered, with the strong jawline and aristocratic bearing that generations of noble breeding had perfected. His dark hair, swept back from a high forehead, was just beginning to silver at the temples, lending him an air of distinguished maturity. Yet it was his eyes that most captivated and unnerved her, steel gray, intelligent, but curiously cold, as though viewing the world through a protective layer of ice. When the time came for their departure, Caroline bid her parents farewell with carefully controlled emotion. Lady Eleanor embraced her tightly, whispering, "Write to me, my darling, and remember, patience often reaps the sweetest rewards." Sir James kissed her forehead, his voice too choked for words before shaking the Duke's hand with all the dignity he could muster. "Take care of her, Your Grace. She is our greatest treasure." "You have my word, Sir James," the Duke replied formally. Oakenhurst Abbey, the Duke's ancestral estate, loomed like a fortress against the darkening sky as their carriage approached that evening. Caroline gazed through the window at the imposing Gothic architecture, its towers and turrets silhouetted against the twilight, gardens stretching into the distance like a sea of shadow. "Your new home," the Duke stated simply, breaking the silence that had persisted throughout their journey. It was not said with pride or warmth, merely a statement of fact. "It's magnificent," Caroline murmured, genuinely awed by the scale and grandeur of the estate. "It has stood for 4 centuries, he replied. "The east wing dates from Tudor times, though most of what you see was rebuilt during my great-grandfather's tenure." The carriage passed through elaborate wrought iron gates and proceeded up a winding drive lined with ancient oak trees. As they drew closer, Caroline could make out more details: the intricate stonework, the countless windows gleaming like stars in the gathering dusk, the sweeping steps leading to massive oak doors. Inside, Caroline was overwhelmed by the grandeur: marble floors, ornate tapestries, priceless artwork, and a household staff that lined up to greet their new mistress with curious eyes. The Duke's housekeeper, Mrs. Winters, a stern-faced woman with silver-streaked hair pulled tightly beneath her cap, stepped forward with a formal curtsy. "Welcome to Oakenhurst Abbey, Your Grace," she addressed Caroline, the title still unfamiliar to her ears. "Thank you, Mrs. Winters," Caroline replied, striving to project a confidence she did not feel. "I look forward to becoming acquainted with the household. The staff has been instructed to assist you in every way as you settle into your role," the Duke stated, his tone making it clear that he expected her to manage domestic matters without troubling him. Mrs. Winters has served Oakenhurst for 20 years, and will guide you through the particular customs of the estate. Mrs. Winters led them through corridors that seemed endless, offering a brief history of the abbey's more notable features. The medieval cloisters incorporated into the north wing, the portrait gallery featuring Ashworth ancestors dating back to the reign of Henry the VIIth, the grand ballroom that had hosted 3 different monarchs over the centuries. Your chambers have been prepared, Your Grace, Mrs. Winters finally informed her, stopping before an ornately carved door. Caroline had expected to share quarters with her husband, as her parents always had. The revelation that she would occupy a separate suite sent a chill through her heart. But she maintained her composure, thanking the housekeeper with the quiet dignity her mother had instilled in her. I trust you will find everything to your satisfaction, Mrs. Winters continued, opening the door to reveal a sumptuous apartment decorated in shades of blue and silver. Your lady's maid, Jane, has already unpacked your belongings. If there is anything else you require, you need only ring. Thank you, Caroline said, taking in the elegant 4-poster bed, the marble fireplace already crackling with a welcoming blaze, the sitting area with delicate furniture that appeared rarely used. I shall leave you to rest, the Duke announced from the doorway. The journey has been long, and you must be fatigued. We will dine at 8 if you feel equal to it. Otherwise, a tray can be sent up. I should prefer to join you for dinner, Caroline replied, determined to begin as she meant to continue, as a proper wife and duchess, not an invalid to be cosset and forgotten. Very well. Mrs. Winters will send your maid to assist you at 7. With a curt nod, he departed, leaving Caroline alone in her new chambers, the enormity of her changed circumstances crashing over her like a wave. Jane, her newly assigned lady's maid, proved to be a blessing, a cheerful, efficient young woman with quick hands and a kind smile. As she helped Caroline change into an evening gown of deep emerald silk, one of the new dresses her parents had commissioned for her trousseau at considerable expense, she offered discreet information about Oakenhurst and its master. The Duke keeps regular hours, Your Grace, Jane explained as she arranged Caroline's hair in an elegant knot. Breakfast is served in the morning room from 7 until 9, though His Grace typically takes his at 7:30 precisely before attending to estate matters. Luncheon is at 1, dinner at 8. The Duke prefers punctuality above all things. And what of the Duke's family? Caroline inquired, hoping to glean some insight into the man she had married. Are there relatives who visit frequently? Only Lady Sophia Pembroke, the Duke's sister, Jane replied as she secured a pearl comb in Caroline's hair. She was unable to attend the wedding due to her mourning period. Her husband passed 6 months ago. She resides primarily in London but visits several times a year. At precisely 8 o'clock, Caroline descended the grand staircase, her heart pounding as she approached the dining room where a footman waited to announce her. The vast chamber, illuminated by a crystal chandelier and dozens of candles, seemed excessive for just 2 diners. The Duke already stood at the head of a table that could easily seat 30 guests. Your Grace, the Duchess of Ashworth, the footman announced. Henry looked up, his expression inscrutable as he watched Caroline's approach. You look well, he observed, the closest thing to a compliment he had offered since their meeting. Thank you, she replied, taking her place at the opposite end of the table, a distance that made conversation nearly impossible without raising one's voice. The meal progressed with excruciating formality, multiple courses served by silent footmen, the clink of silver on fine china echoing in the cavernous room. Caroline attempted conversation several times, inquiring about the estate, the neighboring families, the history of Oakenhurst, but received only perfunctory replies that discouraged further questions. After dinner, they withdrew to a smaller sitting room where coffee was served. Caroline noticed that while the room was beautifully appointed, it had the unlived quality of a museum display, perfect but soulless. Do you play? The Duke asked suddenly, gesturing toward the pianoforte in the corner. A little, Caroline admitted, though I fear I lack any exceptional talent. My mother was an accomplished musician, he said, a distant look in his eyes. This was her favorite room. It was the first personal information he had volunteered, and Caroline seized upon it eagerly. When did she pass away? When I was 12. My father followed 3 years later. His tone made it clear the subject was closed. They lapsed into silence once more, the ticking of the mantel clock marking the slow passage of time. At 10 o'clock, the Duke rose. I have correspondence to attend to, he announced. Please do not feel obliged to wait up. I imagine you must be tired after the day's events. Yes, of course, Caroline replied, disappointment washing over her despite her determination to remain positive. Good night, Your Grace. He hesitated as though about to say something more, then merely inclined his head before departing, leaving Caroline alone with her thoughts and the dying fire. Later that evening, having changed into her finest nightgown with the help of Jane, Caroline sat at her dressing table, brushing her hair with methodical strokes. She had dismissed the maid, preferring solitude as she prepared for what she assumed would be her husband's arrival. Her mother had explained with delicate circumspection what would be expected on her wedding night. While the conversation had left Caroline nervous and uncertain, she was determined to fulfill her duties as a wife with the same grace and dignity she approached all responsibilities. The knock at her door came just as the mantel clock struck 11. The Duke entered without waiting for her response. He had removed his formal attire and wore a dark smoking jacket, his expression inscrutable as he regarded her. Caroline rose, her heart fluttering with nervous anticipation. Despite everything, a small part of her had nurtured hope, perhaps not for passionate love, but for kindness, for companionship, for the chance that affection might grow between them. My lord, she said softly, approaching him with hesitant steps. Henry Ashworth studied her with detached assessment. I trust you find your accommodations satisfactory? Yes, thank you. The rooms are lovely, and the staff has been attentive to your needs. Very much so. Everyone has been most helpful. An uncomfortable silence stretched between them. Caroline, gathering her courage, moved closer, thinking that perhaps he was as uncertain as she. When she was near enough to catch the faint scent of his cologne, she tilted her face upward, waiting for her husband's kiss. Instead, the Duke took a deliberate step backward. His gray eyes, cold as the North Sea in winter, met hers with unflinching directness. I feel no love, no desire for you, he stated, his tone as matter-of-fact as if discussing the weather. This is an arrangement, nothing more. I require an heir and a mistress for my household. You will fulfill these duties, and in return you shall want for nothing material. Each word struck Caroline like a physical blow. The blood drained from her face as she struggled to maintain her composure, to not reveal how deeply his callous honesty wounded her. I understand, she managed, though her voice trembled. I do not wish to be cruel, he continued, his expression softening fractionally at her evident distress. Merely clear. False expectations lead only to unnecessary pain. It is better that we understand each other from the beginning. Yes, Caroline whispered, clasping her hands tightly to prevent them from shaking. I appreciate your honesty. Good, he nodded curtly. I shall not disturb your rest tonight. We will discuss household matters in the morning. Mrs. Winters will provide you with the account books and staff schedules after breakfast. With that, he turned and left, closing the door firmly behind him. The moment he was gone, Caroline's knees gave way. She sank to the floor, silent tears streaming down her cheeks as the full weight of her new reality descended upon her. She had expected perhaps indifference, even coldness, but not such brutal honesty, not such complete rejection. She thought of her parents, of how her father's eyes had crinkled when he smiled at her mother across the breakfast table, of the way her mother had always known when he entered a room without turning to look. She thought of the quiet tenderness they shared, the small, everyday intimacies that had made their home warm despite their financial struggles. Would she ever know such comfort? Or was she destined to wander the cold, grand halls of Oakenhurst Abbey, a duchess in name, but a stranger to her husband's heart? In the vast, unfamiliar bed later that night, surrounded by luxury, but utterly alone, Caroline stared at the ornate canopy above her and allowed herself one night of despair, one night to mourn the dreams she had secretly harbored despite her practical nature. "I was a fool," she whispered into the darkness, "to hope for more than this arrangement." Yet, even as the thought formed, another voice, her mother's voice, seemed to answer. "Patience, my darling. The coldest winters eventually yield to spring. Come morning," she vowed, she would face her new life with dignity. She would be the best Duchess of Ashworth she could be, managing the household with efficiency, representing her husband with grace in public, fulfilling every duty expected of her. But tonight, in the darkness, she whispered her deepest fear into her tear-dampened pillow. "Will I ever know what it is to be truly loved?" Outside her windows, the autumn rain continued to fall, washing away the last vestiges of the life she had known, leaving only uncertainty and the faint, fragile hope that somewhere beneath the Duke's icy exterior beat a heart capable of thawing. The winter months at Oakenhurst Abbey passed with glacial slowness. Caroline adapted to her role as Duchess with quiet determination, learning the intricacies of managing the vast estate, memorizing the names and positions of every servant, and gradually making subtle improvements to the household that had lacked a mistress for too long. Her days fell into a predictable pattern. Mornings were spent reviewing household accounts with Mrs. Winters, who had gradually warmed to Caroline's efficient, respectful management style. Afternoons often found her in the estate's magnificent but neglected conservatory, restoring exotic plants that had withered under insufficient care. "These orchids can be saved," she told Mr. Simmons, the elderly head gardener, as they surveyed the space together. "With proper attention, they'll bloom again by spring. It's been years since anyone truly cared for them, Your Grace," he replied, a note of hope in his voice. The late Duchess had quite the passion for rare specimens. Caroline nodded, gently touching a withered leaf. "Then we shall honor her memory by restoring them." The Duke remained an elusive figure, often absent on business in London or closeted in his study when in residence. Their interactions were formal, limited to necessary discussions about household matters or brief appearances together at local functions, where propriety demanded the presence of both Duke and Duchess. On a particularly bitter January morning, Caroline was summoned to the Duke's study, an unusual occurrence that caused a flutter of apprehension in her chest. "You wish to see me, my lord?" she inquired, standing before his imposing mahogany desk. Henry looked up from his correspondence, his expression guarded as always. "Yes, my sister, Lady Sophia Pembroke, has written to announce her intention to visit next week. She is recently widowed and seeks a change of scenery." Caroline nodded, already mentally reviewing the preparations necessary for an extended guest. "I shall ensure everything is arranged for her comfort." "There is something else you should know," Henry continued, his tone revealing a rare hesitation. "Sophia and I were raised primarily by our grandmother after our parents' deaths. She is protective of me and may not immediately welcome your presence." "I understand," Caroline replied, though inwardly she wondered at the complexity of family dynamics she had yet to unravel. "Is there anything specific I might do to make her feel at ease?" A flicker of surprise crossed the Duke's features as though he had expected a different reaction. "Simply be yourself, I suppose. Sophia appreciates honesty if nothing else." 3 days later, Lady Sophia Pembroke arrived in a flurry of black silk and piercing observations. At 32, she retained the striking Ashworth features, the same steel-gray eyes as her brother, though hers flashed with emotion where his remained coldly controlled. "So, this is the bride," Sophia remarked during their first dinner together, her assessing gaze traveling over Caroline. "Henry's letters mentioned you were managing Oakenhurst competently, but he failed to note your youth. I assure you, Lady Pembroke, I take my responsibilities quite seriously," Caroline replied evenly. "Indeed? And which responsibilities might those be?" Sophia's arched eyebrow conveyed volumes. Henry cleared his throat. "Caroline has made considerable improvements to the household, Sophia. The East Wing is finally habitable again, and the accounts are in better order than they've been in years." "How delightful to have married an efficient housekeeper," Sophia commented dryly. But Caroline caught the thoughtful look she cast toward her brother. Later that evening, unable to sleep, Caroline wandered to the library, seeking solace in books, as had been her habit since childhood. To her surprise, she found Sophia already there, examining the shelves with a glass of brandy in hand. A shocking liberty for a lady, but one that somehow suited her independent air. "My apologies, Lady Pembroke. I didn't mean to intrude," Caroline said, preparing to withdraw. "Stay," Sophia commanded, turning to face her. "And for heaven's sake, call me Sophia. Lady Pembroke reminds me too much of my late husband, who was, I assure you, not worth remembering." Cautiously, Caroline entered the room. "I'm sorry for your loss nonetheless." Sophia laughed without humor. "Are you? Don't be. It was a marriage of convenience that brought me neither happiness nor particular distress. Much like yours, I imagine." The blunt assessment startled Caroline. "Shall we please spare me the polite fiction?" Sophia waved her hand dismissively. "I know my brother. He is many things, but a loving husband is not among them. Not since Elizabeth." Elizabeth! The name slipped from Caroline's lips before she could stop herself. Sophia's eyes widened. "He hasn't told you, has he? Fascinating." She settled into a leather armchair, gesturing for Caroline to take the one opposite. "You ought to know, I suppose, if you're to make any sense of the man you've married." And so, as the fire crackled in the grate, Sophia revealed the history that had shaped the Duke of Ashworth. Elizabeth Carlyle had been Henry's first love, a vibrant, beautiful girl. Beneath a sky heavy with unspoken stories, Oakenhurst held its breath. 5 seconds. Could you resist the allure of a house haunted by love's ghost, about to whisper its secrets anew? From a neighboring estate, Sophia, a woman steeped in empathy, spoke of Henry, her brother. His heart, she explained, had shattered years ago when Elizabeth, his betrothed, succumbed to scarlet fever mere days before their planned union. He was but a young man then, barely past his youth. After Elizabeth passed, he had plunged into the cold efficiency of estate management and politics, building walls around his heart brick by painful brick. Sophia had hoped the passage of time might heal him, soften the sharp edges of his grief. Now, observing Caroline with a newfound curiosity, she asked, "Tell me, what compelled you to accept my brother's hand in marriage? A woman of your caliber surely could have secured a match founded on at least the semblance of affection." Caroline's hands, betraying her nervousness, twisted in her lap. "Our family's circumstances were, shall we say, challenging. And I," she paused, the truth rising within her, unbidden and raw, had never possessed the qualities that attracted suitors. "I faded into the background at balls, was overlooked at dinner parties. When the Duke expressed interest, it felt like a miracle and unexpected grace." "Invisible," Sophia repeated, her voice laced with thoughtful contemplation. "How profoundly interesting. Henry has dedicated a decade to making himself invulnerable, and they have paired him with a woman who has spent her entire life feeling unseen." She placed her empty glass on the nearby table. "Perhaps there resides a wisdom within this arrangement that currently eludes my grasp." The weeks that followed brought a subtle, yet unmistakable, shift to the atmosphere of Oakenhurst. Sophia, instead of departing after the customary week's visit, announced her intention to remain throughout the spring. Her presence became a catalyst, compelling interactions where previously only distance had reigned. She insisted upon daily horseback rides, evenings filled with music, and meals taken together in the formal dining room, rather than allowing Henry to retreat to his solitary study. During one such ride, Caroline, Henry, and Sophia paused to rest their horses near a stream at the edge of the estate. As Sophia wandered ahead, drawn by the promise of early wildflowers, Caroline found herself momentarily alone with her husband. "Your sister has breathed new life into Oakenhurst," she offered cautiously. Henry's gaze followed Sophia's distant figure. "She has always been the heart of our family, the vital force that keeps us connected. At times, I find myself wondering if she shouldn't have been born the heir instead of me." "You manage the estate with remarkable skill," Caroline offered, Managing is not synonymous with truly living, is it? He replied, a rare glimpse of vulnerability that vanished as quickly as it had appeared. Before Caroline could respond, he straightened in his saddle. We should return to the Abbey. The weather appears to be turning. That evening, a fierce storm descended upon Oakenhurst. As lightning illuminated her bedroom in stark, dramatic flashes, Caroline heard a crash emanating from the conservatory below. Concerned for the rare and delicate plants she had so painstakingly nurtured back to health, she hurried downstairs, a lamp held high in her hand. The scene that greeted her was one of devastation. A fallen tree branch had shattered a section of the glass roof, allowing the rain and wind to wreak havoc on the fragile specimens within. Without hesitation, Caroline set to work, gathering the most vulnerable plants and moving them to a safer location. She was so engrossed in her task that she did not notice the Duke's arrival until his voice cut through the howling wind. What, in heaven's name, are you doing? Caroline looked up, suddenly self-conscious of her disheveled appearance, her nightgown and robe soaked, her hair tumbling down her back. Saving what can be saved, she replied simply, continuing her efforts. To her astonishment, Henry removed his dressing gown and rolled up his sleeves. Tell me what needs to be done. Side by side they worked, securing the broken panel with a temporary barricade, rescuing precious plants, mopping up the rising flood of water. When the immediate crisis had passed, they stood amid the dripping foliage, breathing heavily from their exertions. I didn't realize you cared so deeply for these plants, Henry said, observing her with a new sense of awareness. They're living things, Caroline replied, neglected perhaps, but still capable of recovery with proper attention. She met his gaze steadily, and for a fleeting moment, something unspoken passed between them, a quiet understanding. You're shivering, he noted, and in a gesture that surprised them both, he draped his dressing gown around her shoulders. Come, you must change into dry clothes before you fall ill. As they walked back through the darkened house, Caroline was acutely aware of his hand gently guiding her at the small of her back, the first tender touch he had offered since their wedding day. At her chamber door he paused. Thank you, he said stiffly, for caring for Oakenhurst as though it were your own. It is my home now, she answered simply. Good night, Henry. It was the first time she had used his given name. As she closed her door, Caroline didn't see the Duke remain standing in the corridor, a conflicted expression etched upon his face. Nor did she know that he would walk the halls for hours that night, haunted by memories and by new, unsettling possibilities. The following days revealed subtle, yet significant, shifts in their relationship. Henry began appearing in the conservatory during Caroline's afternoon work there, ostensibly to check on the repairs, but lingering to ask questions about particular plants or listen to her plans for the space. My mother was also fond of orchids, he remarked one afternoon, watching as Caroline carefully repotted a damaged specimen. She claimed they represented the perfect balance of strength and delicacy. A wise observation, Caroline replied, pleased by this voluntary sharing of a memory. They are remarkably resilient, despite their fragile appearance. Like certain people, perhaps, Henry said, his gaze resting upon her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. The arrival of a letter from Caroline's parents created another unexpected connection. Her father's health had been declining, and her mother's words carried a thinly veiled layer of concern beneath their cheerful surface. Is everything well? Henry inquired, noticing her troubled expression at the breakfast table. Caroline hesitated, then confided her worries. To her surprise, Henry listened attentively, then made a suggestion. Perhaps they might visit when the weather improves, he offered. The country air could benefit your father's health. You wouldn't mind? Caroline asked, touched by this unexpected consideration. They are family now, he replied simply. As March advanced, bringing the first hints of spring to the estate, Caroline noticed other small, yet meaningful changes. Henry began taking more meals with her, occasionally joining her for walks in the gardens, even once requesting her opinion on plans for improving tenant cottages on the northern boundary. You have a practical mind, he commented when she suggested modifications that would increase comfort while reducing costs. I value that, Coming from the reserved Duke, such words constituted high praise indeed. Caroline treasured these moments, these glimpses of the man beneath the formal exterior, even as she cautioned herself against reading too much into them. One evening, as they sat in the drawing room with Sophia, the conversation turned to music. At her sister-in-law's urging, Caroline played several pieces on the pianoforte, including a Beethoven sonata that had been a favorite of her father's. "You play with genuine feeling," Henry remarked afterward, surprising her with the compliment. "Thank you," Caroline replied, her cheeks warming. "Music has always been a solace." "Henry used to play quite brilliantly," Sophia interjected. "Perhaps you might persuade him to join you in a duet sometime." "I no longer play," Henry said curtly, his expression closing. An uncomfortable silence fell, and Caroline, sensing his discomfort, adroitly changed the subject. Later, when Henry had excused himself to attend to correspondence, Sophia approached Caroline at the pianoforte. "It was Elizabeth's favorite instrument," she explained quietly. "They often played duets together. He hasn't touched a keyboard since her death." "I see," Caroline murmured, understanding better now the complexity of the wounds she navigated. "But he listened to you play," Sophia observed, "for the entire hour without distraction. A month ago he would have found an excuse to leave after the first movement." She squeezed Caroline's hand. "Small steps, my dear. The heart doesn't heal overnight, especially one that's been frozen for so long." In early April, a letter arrived from London that caused Henry's face to darken with concern. Though he said nothing at breakfast, Caroline noticed his distraction, the tension in his shoulders as he excused himself abruptly. That afternoon, she found him in his study, surrounded by ledgers and documents, his expression grim. "Forgive the intrusion," she said from the doorway. "I only wish to ask if you would be joining us for dinner." Henry looked up, seeming almost surprised to find her there. After a moment's hesitation, he gestured her inside. "There's a matter I should perhaps discuss with you, as it affects Oakenhurst." Cautiously, Caroline entered, taking the chair he indicated opposite his desk. "There's been a failure at one of the banks where significant estate funds are held," he explained, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Not a complete collapse, but enough to create complications." "How serious are these complications?" Caroline asked directly. Henry seemed to appreciate her straightforward approach. "Not ruinous, but sufficient to require adjustments. Certain improvements we'd planned for the tenant farms may need to be postponed. The north wing renovations as well." Caroline considered this, then spoke carefully. "If I may, the household budget has a surplus from the economies I've implemented. Not a vast sum, but perhaps enough to proceed with at least the most essential improvements for the tenants." Henry stared at her, clearly not having expected this response. "You would redirect funds allocated for the Abbey?" "The Abbey has stood for centuries and will endure a delayed renovation," Caroline replied simply. "But families with leaking roofs and inadequate wells suffer immediately." For a long moment, Henry was silent, studying her with an expression she couldn't quite interpret. Then, to her astonishment, a smile, small but genuine, curved his lips. "You continue to surprise me, Caroline," he said quietly. "When I agreed to this marriage, I expected a decorative mistress for Oakenhurst, perhaps an eventual mother for an heir. I did not anticipate a partner." The word hung between them, weighted with possibility. Caroline's heart quickened, but she kept her voice steady. "Perhaps that is what a wife should be," she suggested. "Not merely an ornament or a convenience, but a true helpmate." "Perhaps," Henry agreed, still holding her gaze. "I find the idea has considerable merit." That night, as Caroline prepared for bed, she found herself reflecting on the subtle transformation of her marriage over these winter months. From the cold, formal arrangement established on their wedding night, something else had begun to emerge. Not love, certainly, but a mutual respect, a cautious reaching toward connection. She thought of the invisible threads that had begun to weave between them, shared concerns for the estate, appreciation of each other's competence, small moments of unexpected understanding. Individually, each thread was fragile, easily broken, but together they were beginning to form something that might, with time and care, become strong enough to bridge the distance between two solitary hearts. As she drifted toward sleep, Caroline allowed herself to hope, not for grand passion or dramatic declarations, but for the continued strengthening of those quiet threads, for the gradual awakening of the man whose name she bore, but whose heart remained, for now, a chamber she had yet to enter. Outside her window, the first buds of spring swelled on bare branches, promising renewal after the long winter's sleep. Spring arrived at Oakenhurst Abbey with an explosion of color that transformed the austere landscape. The gardens that Caroline had quietly reorganized during winter months now burst with carefully planned arrangements of daffodils, tulips, and hyacinths. The conservatory, repaired and rejuvenated after the storm damage, gleamed in the April sunshine. Caroline stood on the terrace, surveying her handiwork with quiet satisfaction when Sophia joined her, linking their arms companionably. "You've worked wonders," Sophia observed. "I scarcely recognized the place." "Thank you," Caroline replied, her cheeks coloring slightly at the praise. Over the past month, she had come to value Sophia's forthright friendship, a surprising alliance that had blossomed between them. "Henry noticed, Sophia added casually. "I caught him walking the gardens yesterday at dawn, examining your plantings with the most curious expression." Caroline's heart quickened, but she kept her voice measured. "I'm pleased if the Duke approves of the improvements." Sophia sighed dramatically, still so formal even when he isn't present to hear. "The Duke, as though you hadn't been married these 6 months. 6, Caroline corrected automatically, then bit her lip. 6, Sophia repeated, giving her a sidelong glance. "And still sleeping in separate chambers, I'd wager." "Sophia," Caroline gasped, scandalized. "Oh, come now. We're both women of the world. Besides," she added more gently, "I have eyes in my head. I've watched you these months." "Watched him, too. And what exactly do you believe you've seen?" Caroline asked, unable to keep a note of vulnerability from her voice. Sophia turned to face her directly. "I've seen a woman quietly building a home around a man who doesn't know how to inhabit one anymore. And I've seen my brother watching that woman, when he thinks no one notices, with confusion, with respect, and increasingly, I think, with longing." Caroline shook her head. "You're mistaken. He made his feelings quite clear on our wedding night." "Did he?" Sophia raised an eyebrow. "Henry has always been excellent at declaring what he believes to be true, less adept at recognizing when those truths have changed." She squeezed Caroline's arm affectionately. "Just consider that the man who spoke those words to you 6 months ago is not the same man who worked beside you in the rain to save your precious plants." Before Caroline could formulate a response, a footman approached to announce the arrival of unexpected visitors, Lady Eleanor and Sir James Harrington, Caroline's parents. The reunion was joyful, but tinged with concern, as Caroline immediately noted her father's gaunt appearance and labored breathing. "It's nothing, my dear," Sir James insisted when they had a private moment. "A persistent winter chill, nothing more." But Lady Eleanor's worried glance told Caroline otherwise. Later, when the men had retired to discuss estate matters, Eleanor confided the truth. Sir James had suffered a serious bout of pneumonia, and the doctors had recommended a change of air. "We wouldn't impose," Eleanor assured her. "But your father was so determined to see you, to ensure your happiness in this marriage." Caroline embraced her mother tightly. "You could never impose. This is your home for as long as you need it." That evening, Henry surprised Caroline by suggesting they host a small dinner party to welcome her parents properly. "We might invite the Elliots and Judge Wilcox and his wife," he proposed. "People your parents would find congenial." His thoughtfulness touched her deeply. "That would be lovely, thank you." The Duke hesitated, then added, "I've observed that your father seems unwell. Is there anything that might be done?" The genuine concern in his voice emboldened Caroline. "Actually, yes, the physician recommended sea air. I wondered if, perhaps when he's stronger, we might all journey to the Duke's coastal property that Mrs. Winters mentioned, Seacliff House." Henry looked surprised. "It hasn't been opened in years, but yes, that could be arranged. It would be good for Sir James, certainly." "Thank you," Caroline said simply, but her eyes conveyed a deeper gratitude. For a moment, Henry seemed about to say more, but merely nodded and excused himself. The dinner party proved a greater success than anyone anticipated. Caroline, in her element as hostess, guided the conversation skillfully, drawing out shy guests and diplomatically redirecting when topics became contentious. Henry, observing her from the head of the table, found himself increasingly captivated by this side of his wife, confident, gracious, intelligent, in a way that commanded respect without demanding attention. When Judge Wilcox steered the conversation toward local politics, territory where Caroline might reasonably have deferred to her husband, she instead offered insightful observations about the impact of proposed railway expansions on tenant farmers, a perspective that made the judge nod thoughtfully. "Your Duchess has a remarkable understanding of agricultural economics," the judge commented to Henry afterward. "Most ladies of my acquaintance concern themselves solely with household matters." "Caroline is not most ladies," Henry replied, surprising himself with the pride in his voice. Later that night, after the guests had departed and the household had retired, Henry found himself restless. Passing the library, he noticed a light still burning, and entered to find Caroline curled in a window seat, a volume of poetry open on her lap. "You were magnificent this evening," he said without preamble. Caroline looked up, startled. "I beg your pardon?" As hostess, he clarified, moving further into the room. "You handled everything perfectly. Mrs. Elliot's impropriety, the judge's political baiting, even Sophia's impertinent questions." A smile touched Caroline's lips. "Thank you. I enjoyed it." "Actually, you seemed in your element," Henry observed, taking the chair opposite her. "Not at all like," he stopped abruptly. "Not at all like the invisible girl you married." Caroline finished for him, her voice gentle rather than accusatory. Henry had the grace to look discomfort. "I have not been kind to you, Caroline. You have been honest," she replied. "I've always valued honesty, even when it hurts." "Perhaps there are different kinds of truth," he said slowly. "The truth of what I believed when we married, and the truth of what I have come to know since." Caroline's heart began to race, but she kept her expression composed. "And what truth is that?" Henry seemed to struggle with his words, an unusual state for a man typically so assured. "That you are remarkable," he finally said, "that Oakenhurst has become a home again under your care, that my sister smiles more than she has in years, that when you enter a room I find myself." He trailed off, then stood abruptly. "Forgive me, it's late, and you must be tired after entertaining." "Henry," Caroline called softly as he reached the door. He turned back, his expression guarded. "I was never invisible," she said, "just unseen." Their gazes held for a long moment before he nodded once and departed, leaving Caroline to wonder at the subtle shifting of their relationship, like the first tender shoots of spring emerging after a long winter. In the weeks that followed, Sir James's health improved noticeably, bolstered by the country air and Caroline's attentive care. Preparations began for the journey to Seacliff House, a flurry of activity that brought new energy to the Abbey. One afternoon, Caroline was reviewing inventories with Mrs. Winters when a commotion in the entrance hall drew their attention. They emerged to find Henry supporting a young boy of perhaps 12 years, the child's face pale with pain, his leg bent at an unnatural angle. "What happened?" Caroline asked, immediately moving to help. "He's one of the stableman's sons," Henry explained, his voice tight with concern. "His horse spooked and threw him against the fence. I believe his leg is broken." Without hesitation, Caroline took charge, directing servants to prepare a room, sending for the doctor, and helping Henry settle the boy, Timothy, she learned, onto a settee while they waited. "You're at Oakenhurst Abbey now," she soothed the terrified child, distracting him from his pain with gentle questions about his favorite horses, while Henry looked on, something like wonder in his expression. The doctor confirmed a clean break that would heal well with proper care. When he suggested the boy be moved back to his family's cottage, Caroline intervened. "He'll stay here," she declared, "where we can ensure he receives proper care and rest." When the doctor seemed about to object, she added firmly, "I insist." Later, after Timothy had been settled in a comfortable guest room, with his anxious parents reassured, Henry found Caroline in her sitting room, her normally immaculate appearance disheveled, a smudge of dirt on her cheek from where she had wiped away the boy's tears. "That was extraordinary," he said quietly. Caroline looked up wearily. "It was only right." "For not everyone would see it so," Henry replied, moving to sit beside her on the small sofa, closer than he had ever voluntarily positioned himself before. "Most women of your station would have sent the boy to the servants' quarters at best." "I am not most women," she echoed his words from the dinner party. "No," he agreed, his voice deepening. "You are certainly not." In a gesture that seemed almost unconscious, he reached out to brush the smudge from her cheek, his fingers lingering against her skin. Caroline held perfectly still, scarcely breathing as something electric passed between them. The moment stretched, fraught with possibility, until the clock chimed the hour, startling them both. Henry withdrew his hand slowly, reluctantly. "I should let you rest," he said, rising. At the door he paused. "Caroline, thank you for bringing kindness back to Oakenhurst." As May turned to June, the planned journey to Seacliff House approached. The evening before their departure, Caroline was surprised to receive a small package delivered by Henry's valet. Inside lay an exquisite silver locket on a delicate chain. Opening it, she found a miniature painting of Oakenhurst Abbey on one side, and on the other, a tiny pressed flower, a forget-me-not from her conservatory. A note in Henry's precise handwriting accompanied it for the journey, and for making Oakenhurst worth remembering when we are away. H. Caroline pressed the locket to her heart, overcome with emotion. It was not a declaration of love, not quite, but it was acknowledgement, appreciation, a recognition that she was no longer unseen. The next morning, as their traveling carriage pulled away from Oakenhurst, Caroline caught Henry watching her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. Sophia, seated opposite them, observed the exchange with barely concealed satisfaction. "I believe," Sophia murmured to Caroline when Henry was distracted by Sir James's questions about the journey, "that Seacliff House may witness developments that Oakenhurst has only begun to imagine." Caroline's fingers strayed to the locket at her throat, and for the first time since her wedding night, she allowed herself to hope. Seacliff House stood like a sentinel at the edge of the world, its weathered stone facade commanding a breathtaking view of the restless sea below. Unlike the imposing grandeur of Oakenhurst Abbey, the coastal manor possessed a wild, romantic charm that immediately captivated Caroline. "It's magnificent," she breathed as their carriage wound up the cliff path. "My mother loved this place," Henry remarked, his eyes on the horizon. "She claimed the sea air cleared one's thoughts, and the isolation freed one's spirit." It was the first time he had voluntarily shared anything about his parents, and Caroline treasured the confidence, even as she noted how the mention of his mother softened his features. The house staff, hastily assembled from the village and neighboring estates, had done their best to prepare the long and used residence, but Caroline quickly discovered much remained to be done. Rather than expressing dismay, she embraced the challenge with characteristic determination. "We shall make it comfortable," she assured her father, who worried the primitive conditions might worsen his health rather than improve it. "My dear girl," Sir James replied fondly, "you have always possessed the remarkable ability to create sanctuary wherever you go." The first week passed in a flurry of activity, airing rooms, ordering provisions, establishing routines. Caroline found herself working alongside the hastily assembled staff, rather than merely directing them, rolling up her sleeves to scrub stubborn salt stains from windows and help the cook rescue ancient kitchen equipment from disuse. One evening, Henry discovered her in the disused library, balanced precariously on a ladder as she cleaned grime from book spines that had likely gone untouched for a decade. "Caroline," he exclaimed, rushing forward as the ladder wobbled dangerously. The air hung thick with unspoken tension, a silent dare dancing between them. Would she fall? His hands, unexpectedly strong, circled her waist, a warmth that chased away the lingering chill of the ancient library. Caroline's breath hitched, not from the precarious climb, but from the sudden, undeniable awareness of him. "I'm quite all right," she managed, her voice betraying the tremor she desperately tried to hide, clinging to the worn leather of the salvaged books. He lingered, his touch a gentle restraint. "You mustn't exhaust yourself," he murmured, the words a soft reprimand against the chaos surrounding them. She knew the household lacked sufficient staff, unfamiliar with the manner but confessed, "I find I enjoy the work, the satisfying to bring order from chaos." A question hung in the air, thick with unspoken history. "Is that what you've been doing at Oakenhurst as well? Creating order from the chaos I allow to develop?" Caroline hesitated, then offered a glimpse of her soul. "Perhaps, though I would call it creating a home rather than merely order." A flicker, a fleeting vulnerability, danced in his eyes, a longing that resonated deep within her. "And have you found home there?" "I'm beginning to," she whispered, the words a fragile promise hanging in the silent space. The moment stretched, taut with unspoken desires, until the approaching voices shattered the fragile spell. He stepped back, releasing her, yet his gaze held hers captive, communicating a silent language she dared not yet fully understand. The days that followed unfolded with a gentle rhythm, a healing balm to their wounded spirits. Mornings were dedicated to restoring health, afternoons to exploration and discovery. Evenings were filled with simple joys, shared stories, and laughter unburdened by London's suffocating constraints. In this relaxed atmosphere, Caroline witnessed a remarkable transformation. Henry, once so reserved, laughed freely, sparred playfully in chess matches, and, most memorably, joined her in song. "You never mentioned you could sing," she remarked, surprised by the rich baritone that intertwined with her modest soprano. A shadow fell across his face. "There has been little music at Oakenhurst for many years. Since Elizabeth?" The name escaped before she could restrain it, a trespass into hallowed ground. He stiffened, then exhaled, the sound heavy with unspoken grief. "Yes, she loved music. After she died, I couldn't bear to hear it." "I'm sorry," Caroline offered softly, "for your loss and for raising painful memories." He studied her face, seeking something hidden within. "It was not your question that surprised me, but rather my reaction to it," he admitted. "The pain is different now, less immediate. I can speak of her without feeling as though my chest is being crushed. Time heals, they say." Caroline offered, a gentle platitude. "Time alone does not heal," he corrected gently. "It merely distances. Other things heal. Purpose, kindness, new connections." His eyes locked on hers, a silent promise exchanged. New beginnings. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of fire, Henry proposed a picnic on a secluded beach. The descent was treacherous but rewarding, revealing a crescent of golden sand embraced by towering cliffs. As their companions discreetly wandered off, creating a space for intimacy, Henry drew Caroline closer. "Walk with me." Hand in hand, they strolled along the water's edge, the cool waves whispering secrets to their bare feet. He led her into a hidden sea cave, where the ocean's roar echoed against the ancient stone. "I brought something for you," he said, his voice resonating with a newfound tenderness. "Something that should have been yours from the beginning." He presented a velvet box, revealing a magnificent ring, a sapphire surrounded by diamonds, an heirloom of the Ashworth family. "The Ashworth betrothal ring," he explained, his voice thick with emotion. "I couldn't give it to you when we married. It felt like a betrayal of what it symbolized, a love match, a true union of hearts." He took her hand, where a simple gold band already rested. "Caroline Harrington Ashworth," he said solemnly, "I married you in name and law 6 months ago, but today I ask you to marry me in heart and soul. Will you accept this ring as a symbol not of duty or arrangement, but of my deepest love and devotion?" Tears streamed down her face as she nodded, whispering, "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then drew her into his arms. "Somewhere between your kindness to a fallen stable boy and your laughter with my impossible sister, I have fallen in love with you, Caroline." He confessed, the words hanging in the salt-laden air. "I don't deserve your love, not after how I've treated you. But if you could find it in your heart to forgive me, to allow me to court you properly, not as the Duke courting a suitable match, but as a man who admires and cherishes everything about the woman who has become his wife in name only. Henry, Caroline interrupted, placing her hand against his cheek. I have loved you since the night we saved the conservatory together, perhaps even before, in ways I didn't yet understand. He searched her eyes, disbelief battling with dawning hope. How can you have loved me when I gave you no reason, no encouragement? Love doesn't always require reason, she answered simply. Sometimes it simply grows, like those neglected plants in the conservatory, quiet and persistent, requiring only the smallest glimmer of light to flourish. Slowly, reverently, he leaned forward. May I kiss you, Caroline? Not as duty, not as arrangement, but as a husband who loves his wife with all his heart. Her answer was a kiss, a meeting of souls that spoke of months of longing, of hopes long buried, of a future now radiant with possibility. As they parted, the sunset painted the sky in breathtaking colors. He held her close, a protectiveness that whispered of newfound treasures. We should return to the others, she murmured, reluctant to break the spell. He chuckled, the sound a warm vibration against her cheek. I suspect Sophia at least will have a fairly accurate idea. She's been rather transparent in her matchmaking efforts. Caroline agreed with a soft laugh. My sister lacks subtlety, but possesses remarkable insight, he replied, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. She saw what I was too blind to recognize, that the arrangement I so coldly established was becoming the greatest blessing of my life. They walked back hand in hand, their linked fingers a silent declaration. Sophia's knowing smile confirmed their transformation. Well, she drawled, it appears Seacliff House has worked its magic more quickly than even I anticipated. That evening, Henry announced their intention to renew their vows in a small, private ceremony. Tears of joy filled Lady Evelina's eyes, and Sir James, his health restored, clasped Henry's hand with heartfelt gratitude. The days that followed were filled with gentle preparations. Caroline, freed from the weight of uncertainty, radiated an inner beauty that captivated Henry. He, in turn, shed his cold formality, revealing the thoughtful, playful man beneath. One evening, Caroline found him studying a portrait miniature, a face she didn't recognize. Elizabeth, she said softly, recognizing the moment called for neither jealousy nor retreat. He nodded, showing her the portrait of a vivacious young woman with laughing eyes. I've carried this for 9 years, not out of romantic notion, but because I feared forgetting her face. Caroline studied the miniature with gentle respect. She was beautiful. She was, he agreed, his voice tinged with sorrow. We grew up together, and loving her seemed as natural as breathing. When she died, I convinced myself that I had experienced my one allotment of love in this life, and that duty alone would sustain me thereafter. He took her hands in his. I was wrong, Caroline, so terribly wrong. What I feel for you is different from what I felt for Elizabeth, but no less profound. Perhaps even deeper, because it has grown from respect and admiration rather than childhood affection. I never dared hope for this, she confessed, her voice trembling. After our wedding night, I thought perhaps in time we might achieve a comfortable companionship, but never this. I have much to atone for, he said, raising her hands to his lips. Words spoken that cannot be unsaid. Months of coldness you did not deserve. Will you allow me a lifetime to make amends? There is nothing to forgive, Caroline replied softly. We begin anew here and now. The next morning, they explored the village together, his interactions with the locals revealing a depth of character hidden beneath his aristocratic facade. As they walked back along the cliff path, he spoke of his hopes for the future, ambitious plans to improve the estate and the lives of those who depended on it. I've also been thinking about heirs. Caroline's heart skipped a beat. I've been a duke without a duchess in more than name, he continued carefully. And while Oakenhurst needs an heir, I find I'm more concerned with being a husband and perhaps someday a father, not for the sake of the title, but for the family we might create together. I would like that very much, she replied softly, her eyes shining with happiness. The renewal ceremony took place at sunset on the cliffside terrace, a celebration of second chances and enduring love. The vows they exchanged were not mere recitations, but heartfelt promises to see and be seen, to cherish and to protect. "Caroline," Henry said, his voice thick with emotion, "I pledge to you not just my name, my protection, or my honor, though these are yours without question. I pledge to you my heart fully and without reservation. I promise to see you truly, every day of our lives together. You have brought light back into my world, and I will spend my life ensuring you never again feel invisible or unvalued." Caroline responded in kind, her voice trembling with emotion. "Henry, I pledge to you my heart, my faith, and my abiding love. I promise to stand beside you in all seasons, to create home wherever we may be. You have given me the greatest gift, the knowledge that I am truly seen and valued. I will spend my life helping you remember how to live with an open heart." As the vicar pronounced them husband and wife once more, their embrace erased all memory of their first, perfunctory kiss. This was no sealed contract, but a promise embodied. Later, as they waltzed beneath the moonlight, Henry whispered in her ear, "Do you remember what I said to you on our wedding night?" Caroline tensed, the painful memory still capable of stinging. "I do." "I was a fool," Henry said firmly. "A blind, heartless fool. Tonight I say the opposite. I love you beyond measure, Caroline. My desire for you consumes me. This is not an arrangement. It is the greatest blessing of my life. And I love you, Henry Ashworth, with all that I am, all that I ever will be." Later, as they stood alone on the terrace, watching the moonlight dance across the sea, they knew their lives had been forever transformed. "Are you nervous?" he asked gently, his arms encircling her. "A little," she admitted. "But not afraid. Never afraid when I'm with you." He turned her in his arms, his expression solemn. "I make you this vow, Caroline, beyond what we spoke today. You will never again be invisible. Not to me, not to anyone who matters. I will spend every day of our lives ensuring you know how deeply you are seen, how completely you are loved." In the master bedroom of Seacliff House, with the sound of waves crashing against the cliffs and starlight streaming through the windows, husband and wife truly became one, not in dutiful obligation, but in passionate, tender love that had been worth every moment of waiting, every heartache of uncertainty. As summer reached its zenith, they prepared to return to Oakenhurst, no longer strangers bound by duty, but lovers united by choice. The journey back felt entirely different, filled with shared dreams and whispered promises. When Oakenhurst finally came into view, Caroline felt a surge of affection for the great house. It was home now, truly home. The staff, lined up to greet them, couldn't help but notice the transformation in their master and mistress. That night, Henry appeared at the connecting door that had remained closed since their wedding night. "I've had the master suite prepared for us," he said, his eyes filled with hope. "But if you prefer your own space." Caroline crossed the room and placed her fingers against his lips. "I have had quite enough of separate chambers to last a lifetime," she said softly. "Take me to our room, husband." The months that followed brought changes to Oakenhurst that few would have predicted. The estate flourished, the conservatory bloomed, and, most significantly, the Duke transformed. In early spring, Caroline shared news that completed their joy. She was expecting their first child. Henry's reaction erased any lingering doubt that their marriage had transcended its pragmatic beginnings to become something extraordinary. "Are you pleased?" she asked, running her fingers through his hair as he knelt before her. He looked up, his eyes shining with tears. "Beyond measure," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "I never thought to know such happiness, Caroline. Never believed myself worthy of it after how I treated you. The past is behind us," she said gently. "We look only forward now. Have you ever wondered if love can truly mend even the most frozen heart?" In the hushed halls of Oakenhurst, a story unfolded, a testament to the quiet power of compassion. Caroline insisted on working with the tenant families until the very end of her pregnancy, and Henry, understanding her need for purpose, accompanied her. Jane, loyal and discreet, remained by Caroline's side, a constant source of support and reassurance, her presence a gentle hand of friendship. Early summer brought Lady Ellalinina to Oakenhurst, bearing the news that Sir James had peacefully passed. His last words filled with joy that Caroline had found her way home, not just to Oakenhurst, but to true love. Caroline wept, grieving her father, yet grateful he had witnessed her happiness. Henry embraced them both, his tenderness a stark contrast to the man he once was. In late June, Lady Eleanor Grace Ashworth entered the world, and Henry, defying tradition, remained by Caroline's side. His face the first she saw as their daughter lay nestled against her breast. "She has your eyes," he whispered, tracing their daughter's cheek, "and your quiet strength." As summer faded into autumn, the family settled into a new rhythm. Caroline recovered, aided by Lady Eleanor, and Henry found joy in spending time with his wife and daughter. Sophia, her work at Oakenhurst complete, announced her departure, promising to return for the christening, declaring that Caroline had made Henry human again. On their anniversary, Henry led Caroline to the conservatory, now a paradise of blooms, a symbol of her care. He had arranged an intimate dinner amidst the lush foliage. "Do you remember?" he asked, and Caroline replied, "How could I forget? It was the first time I truly saw you," Henry admitted, raising her hand to his lips. "Not as the convenient bride, but as Caroline, brave and compassionate." He presented her with a gold bracelet, adorned with enameled flowers. "For the woman who taught me that neglected hearts, like neglected plants, can flourish again with proper care. I love you, Henry Ashworth," Caroline said simply, her love growing with each passing day. "And I love you, my Caroline," he replied, his voice full of emotion. The woman who was never truly invisible, merely waiting for the right eyes to see her. As they kissed, Caroline reflected on their journey, from a pragmatic agreement to a love that had transformed them both. Henry found peace in knowing that love was not weakness, but strength. And Caroline found joy in being deeply cherished by the man who now spoke only of love and gratitude. Dear listener, perhaps as you reflect, you might find solace in their story. It's a reminder that even the coldest heart can learn to feel again, and that no one is ever truly forgotten by life. Like the orchids in Caroline's conservatory, you too possess strength. You are not invisible. You are not past your prime. You are still becoming, still capable of bringing beauty and warmth into the world. Tonight, let your soul rest easy. Let go of any burdens you carry. Remember that love, respect, and recognition can arrive unexpectedly. Our most beautiful seasons can come later in life. You are cherished. You are protected. You are not alone. Sleep peacefully, dear one. Tomorrow holds gentle promises. The courage it takes to love again, to trust again, is the quietest kind of strength.